Do we go for it?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, hello and a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us for Puget Sound Association of Legal Administrators annual Passing of the Gavel event. It's a very momentous day. I know that today we've got chapter members, some managing partners, and our chapter business partners with us today. So welcome to all of you. We've got an informative program in store today on a timely and relevant topic, given where we're at in the pandemic and planning in our respective firms for an eventual return to work in the office. I'd like to extend a very special welcome to our panelists from Downtown Seattle Association and the Seattle Police Department, who are with us today to talk through the current state of affairs downtown in Seattle and what we need to know as part of planning for and communicating with our employees about our office returns. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Veronica Sutton, and I am the PSALA Vice President for Education and HR Director at Hillis Clark Martin and Peterson. I'm joined here by a lot of you, but in particular, our immediate past President, Michelle Smith, and our incoming President for 2021, Amy Strock, and our President-elect, Suzanne Tran, who's also with us. As for our agenda, we're going to hear from our guest panelists during this hour and then turn our program over to the passing of the gavel. I'd like now to introduce our panelists. So first, we're going to hear from John Scholes. John is with the Downtown Seattle Association, and he's going to talk about downtown and the effects of the last year on commercial real estate and trends. John is president and CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association, where he's responsible for the operations and programs of the DSA, a 2,100 member association formed in 1958 to create a healthy, vibrant downtown. John is also responsible for the management of the 285 block business improvement district that was established in 1999 in downtown Seattle to provide cleaning, safety, transportation, marketing, and public realm management services in downtown. John has spent more than 15 years working in nonprofit advocacy, local government, and in senior positions on political campaigns at the regional and state levels. He is a current member of the Seattle Center Advisory Commission and serves on the boards of Visit Seattle, Transportation Choices Coalition, the International Downtown Association, and Downtown Emergency Services Center. He served on a number of city and county task forces on transportation, homelessness, and housing. So welcome, John. We will then hear from Jennifer Danner and Matthew Roberson, who are both with the Seattle Police Department. They will also address the question of the state of downtown along with crime trends and safety tips. Jennifer is the Southwest Precinct Crime Prevention Coordinator with SPD, working with Seattle community members to reduce their likelihood of being a victim of crime by offering safety and security assessments, assistance with block watch groups, and by presenting at community events and meetings. She also runs a few community outreach programs, including the Women's Personal Safety Program and Paws on Patrol. She also serves as the secretary for the Washington State Crime Prevention Association. Matthew has worked at the city since 2007 and is currently a youth outreach officer in the Collaborative Policing Bureau. He focuses on violence prevention, intervention, and relationship building activities with young people, often working in collaboration with various youth serving agencies. He leads talking and education programs, mentors youth, participates in community events, and organizes a wide variety of Seattle Police Activities League activities. So welcome, Jennifer and Matt. We're very happy to have you with us. If you have questions during our program, please feel free to use the chat feature. Amy and I will be keeping an eye on that. And then you'll also have an opportunity during Q&A at the end of our program to ask any questions that you have of our knowledgeable panelists. I'm now going to turn the floor over to John to kick off our program. So welcome, John.
Well, thanks so much, Veronica, for the introduction, and thanks, Amy, for helping to coordinate. And good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm John Scholes, and I have the great privilege of being the CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association. And I've been in this role for just about 7 years and been with the organization for about 13. And I live downtown and have raised my kids downtown for the past 9 years. Have twins, 11-and-a-half-year-old boy and a girl. And I'm here in our office today at 7th and Olive. We're just on the north side of Pacific Place, and I live across the street. So kind of live and work and play in the heart of it here. And what I'd hope to do today, just briefly, is summarize what some of the impacts have been to downtown from the pandemic over the last year, where we sort of sit today as we look ahead to and are in the spring and summer here and are looking forward to mass vaccinations within our community, a little bit about what's at stake around downtown recovery, and then where do we go from here? What do we need to be focused on to support renewal and recovery of downtown Seattle? So as you all are aware, downtown was really the first urban area in the country to feel the economic and the health effects from coronavirus back in early March of 2020. We had nowhere really to look in our own country around sort of how fast these impacts economically would take shape. We had all these other cities and regions and urban areas looking at us, and my colleagues on the board of the International Downtown Association were calling, saying, what's going on in Seattle and what's happening there economically, what's going on with your downtown. And I think what's some ways somewhat remarkable in my mind is how swift and severe the economic impacts to our downtown were in that first week of March. On March 5th, we and tens of thousands of other employees in our city and region went to work from home, and the streets and sidewalks of downtown got quiet real fast. And it was pretty amazing just how fast that happened. And I remember sitting in the restaurant bar in the ground floor of this building at 7th and Olive, I think on that Friday night, and looking around, and I was the only one there except for the bartender and a server. And the next day, that location and 3 others closed permanently, and 150 people were laid off. And it was an indication of just how quick and devastating the economic impacts were and were going to be. And I was reaching out to folks in the arts community and some of the folks who run attractions and hotels and other restaurants and retail, and they were losing customers fast. No surprise when the downtown's all about bringing people together, and in a pandemic we're all told to stay apart, that the impacts economically to downtown Seattle, but downtowns in general, have really been disproportionate and really have had an outsized impacts on downtowns relative to other parts of our country. And we were a downtown that was firing on 8 cylinders, coming off 20 years of record investment and growth, job growth, residential growth, investment in infrastructure. Not to say we didn't have a significant number of challenges, but we were flying high in many respects, and things got quiet real fast. And so the impacts to date have been significant, particularly to the small business community. We've had 180 permanent closures of ground level businesses in the greater downtown. So that's generally from South Lake Union down through Pioneer Square. And those are small businesses that aren't going to come back in the next phase. They've had to permanently close. Those are mostly restaurants and retailers, but others like personal service firms and some gyms, things like that at the ground level. So that's a significant challenge. Our hotel occupancy was really riding in the single digits for most of 2020. We had a number of hotels that closed for a good number of months. Most are now back reopened. There's a handful that are still closed. The meetings and conventions, the quick contraction of that business, and then the absence of the cruise season had a pretty significant impact on our arts and cultural community and attractions. The arts and cultural community lost about $150 million in revenue over this last year, and still is experiencing, as with the hospitality sector, significant furloughs and permanent layoffs that have had to take place. So this pandemic has not been friendly to those places like downtowns that are all about bringing us together. And in some ways, the higher quality of your downtown, when you look across the country or world, the more that you had going into this, if you were a place like Seattle that, was desirable for leisure travelers, that had the convention center in the middle of downtown, that had retail and a food scene, and had the arenas and sports stadiums close in, like we do. If you had all of those pieces and you had that quality of that mix, the impact is almost more severe than downtowns that don't have all of that going for them. And the contrast between sort of where we were prior to 2020 and where we are today in many respects is sharper than downtowns that didn't have those components. But we find ourselves in that position along with the great cities and downtowns like a San Francisco or New York or Chicago that have all of those parts and pieces that, when everything's working well and you can gather and be together, all of those help feed one another. Those conventioneers are customers for Nordstrom and they go to shows. And so it all helps reinforce. But when you're told to be apart, the impacts come quickly and have been really devastating. Over the last couple of months, we've seen some return of activity in the downtown. Foot traffic is up about 24% compared to early February. We finally got over 30% in hotel occupancy. So we were hovering in single digits for a while and then in the teens, could barely break into the 20s. And the last couple of weeks and weekends, we've gotten into the low 30s, mid 30s as far as occupancy. It's a bit uneven at the north end of downtown around Seattle Center and South Lake Union. That's where we're seeing higher levels of occupancy. Those convention hotels like the Westin and the Hyatts are still pretty low, some still in the single digits. We still have just about 15% of office workers coming into their office some days of the week. That number has not changed in a significant way really since the summer. We saw a little bit of recovery in May, June, and July, but it's held flat since then. And then transit ridership is up a little bit. But that visitor traffic and the foot traffic downtown is giving us some hope. And if you've been downtown lately relative to a couple of months ago, you feel that on the street just anecdotally of seeing people out taking pictures, clearly folks that are visiting from other places. And so our leisure travel, office workers, and then the regional visitor are really going to be our primary audiences and segments that come back sooner and are going to be really key to early stages of recovery. The business traveler, the conventioneer, the international traveler, those are folks that are going to likely be coming back later this year, but most likely into 2022. The health of downtown is critical to the entire city and region, I would argue. And I've never been to a great city that doesn't have a healthy, thriving urban core. So there's a lot at stake here, not just for the folks who live or own property or have a business or investment here, but really for our entire city. We've made a significant number of investments as a community in Seattle, the Seattle voters adopting levies for low-income housing and families in education to supplement the school district spending, to invest in universal preschool. We've made a series of investments over the last decade in particular that have really assumed and bet on a healthy, thriving downtown. So there's much at stake here as we look toward recovery and getting our downtown going again. I'd rather be here though than just about any other downtown given the assets that we have. When I think back to previous recessions and downturns that have impacted downtown Seattle, and I look at the set of assets that folks were dealing with then as they look to rebuild relative to the footprint and base of downtown that exists today, relative to some of the major investments that are underway and will soon be completed, from the Central Waterfront to the Climate Pledge Arena to a new world-class convention center addition, which is going to be completed next year, to the opening of light rail between downtown and Northgate in September, improvements to the monorail that just kicked off this last week. The diversity of our economic base here, of having the incredible tech growth that we've experienced over the last decade. I'd rather be here with those assets, the desirability for folks to want to live and be in Seattle because of the high quality of life, than other areas. And that's not to say that we don't have an incredible amount of challenges, or to say that we haven't made that our city government hasn't made unforced errors and self-inflicted wounds over this last year, because I absolutely believe they have, and that's damaging to our brand. And we've made too many headlines for all the wrong reasons that lead the Today Show nationally, or that show up in the Wall Street Journal or other papers around our country. That is not the great look for Seattle, not what we need to instill confidence in folks that want to come plan a meeting or convention here, or continue to grow their company here, or open a small business, or get on a plane with their family to visit. So we have much work to do to recover our brand and to get back on solid footing as a city. So where do we go from here? What we're focused on over these next 6 to 9 months is, again, really on the office worker, and making sure when they come back, it's a delightful experience to them. Leisure travelers and the regional visitor that may not have been downtown in over a year, the family from Ballard or the family from Issaquah. Those are the first segments of folks that we're going to focus on welcoming back. And to do that, downtown's got to be safe and welcoming for them. Cities have never worked if folks don't first feel safe and welcomed to be there. We're going to focus on making it clean and beautiful. We've had plenty of plywood that's gone up, and graffiti and broken windows. We spent a lot of time over the last several months to bring a lot of that down, just to clean up and get the house in order, so that it looks good when people are coming back. Transportation and access is key. Our transit system right now, the capacity is incredibly strained because of the limitations on the number of people that can be on a bus and the number of people that can be on a train. And we know to invite office workers back and others, we've got to increase capacity. So that's something we're focused on. And also promoting the amount and availability of more affordable, and in some cases free parking that we do have here. You can park in any Amazon garage in the evening or weekend for free, but not many people know that. And there's lots of access, lots of capacity there. We believe that outdoor events and really activating our parks and public spaces, particularly as we get into the summer and the fall, is going to be a big part of creating great experiences and reasons for people to be here. Our arts and cultural organizations and those performance venues are not going to be able to put productions on their stages immediately once restrictions are lifted further. They need lead time to create that performance or that musical. And so we need to fill that gap by creating those opportunities in our outdoor public spaces, by shutting down streets on Saturdays, by programming parks and the pier with concerts and performance art and food and vending. We need to really leverage our public spaces, particularly during the great summer months that we're fortunate to have in Seattle. We're going to need to market and communicate and promote that which is reopened. There's plenty that's open today in downtown Seattle. We need to hold up and celebrate that, and to hold up the images of people in our downtown enjoying the Pike Place Market, showing up for concerts on the pier, taking in a Mariner game, and to sort of reorient people to some positive imagery of what downtown has to offer, and those experiences that people really enjoyed and loved, and that you can only get downtown, that you can't get behind your laptop, that you can't get in your kitchen. So rebuilding our brand and focusing on marketing communication, again, really to the regional visitor, but also to leisure travelers up and down the West Coast that are dying to get out of their own city. They want to get on a plane and go somewhere else. We want to bring them to Seattle, and we want to make sure that they're choosing Seattle. And we'll be working closely with Visit Seattle, our partner that really promotes our region around the country and around the world, both for leisure travelers and business travelers. So those are the areas generally that we're focused on as an organization. There's a lot here that we need city government and the county government to lead on. The challenge around chronic homelessness, the challenge around safety that we went into this pandemic with, has been made worse by it. The criminal justice system, in many respects, has not functioned over the last year. There's 7,000 cases that have not been heard. The capacity in the jail is limited. Many folks that are being arrested are not being booked into jail and are being turned away and put back on the street by judges because of the restrictions on the number of people that can be in the jail. So we have a criminal justice system in many ways that has not functioned. And that's true across our country and in cities throughout the US because of the pandemic's impact. The very unfortunate, I think, irresponsible decisions by some city leaders to signal their desire to cut our police department in half has resulted in more than 200 officers that have left the force. So we have some of the lowest staffing levels that we've had in nearly 20 years. We're investing directly in off-duty officers to put more foot and bike patrols out on the streets in downtown, and then there's some property owners that are making similar investments. So the issues around safety, around homelessness, are significant, and they were challenges we had in downtown and other parts of the city prior to this pandemic, and they've been made worse. Last week, you may have seen we, along with a couple of other organizations in the city, proposed and introduced an amendment to the city charter, the city's constitution, that would require a new approach around chronic homelessness, require investments in treatment and services at levels we've not made, require investments in temporary emergency housing in addition to permanent housing, but the cheaper, faster temporary housing that we've not invested enough in fast enough, so that we can meet people where they are with the services they need. We have too many people suffering in our parks, our public spaces, on sidewalks, and the city has no plan to respond to this crisis. We have thousands of people in our park system and in other public spaces. We all see them. If you're out and about Seattle, you can be in Ballard or Sodo or Capitol Hill or downtown, and you see too many folks suffering. So this charter amendment would require a level of urgency, investment, prioritization of existing city revenues, and investment in those services that I mentioned, if adopted by voters in November. And we hope that city leaders take note of voters signing these petitions that will soon be available out on the street in the next week, and they start moving in this direction before the vote. We hope that they start listening to voters and the frustration in our city around our inability to meet this crisis head on. But there's no doubt that the issue of chronic homelessness and safety, I think, are the most significant challenge and threat to our recovery, and also just to our fellow neighbors that are out there suffering today. And we have to confront these issues with more clarity, a greater sense of urgency and partnership. Treat it as an emergency. We declared it as an emergency in our city 6 years ago. We really need to act like it's one. And that's really what this charter amendment is about. And I urge you to go to compassionseattle.org, which is the campaign that's come together to advance this charter amendment to the ballot. And you can learn more about it and how you can help and get involved. We're going to be focused on a couple of welcome back weeks in downtown, the 2 weeks after the 4th of July and the 2 weeks after Labor Day, as sort of key windows of time to mobilize collective action that companies, organizations, individuals can take to create a welcoming, delightful atmosphere of concerts, music, promotions, deals, happy hours, things going on over a 2-week period to really welcome folks back. That if employers have made decisions to come back, in July, or some might make decisions to come back later, closer to September, that when those office workers are coming back, or we're trying to draw families from parts of our region or city that maybe haven't come downtown for a year, that we have these windows where there's going to be lots going on, and that we can really come together as a community, and everybody can sort of do their part, whether you're a retailer or you're a restaurateur or you're the Seattle Art Museum or the market, that we can all be sort of pulling on the oar and contributing to an environment that really sends a welcoming signal that you can come downtown over this period and have a great time and take in experiences that you can't do from other parts of in other parts of our region or from your own neighborhood. So look for more information there. That's something we're working with City Hall and the mayor's office on, really to create critical mass and collective action. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. I really look forward to the questions and want to leave my comments there just to leave room for my fellow panelists and your input and your questions as well. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you, John. Do we have time for maybe a couple of questions that came through the chat? I think we do. One of the questions, putting you on the spot a little bit, as a downtown Seattle resident, do you feel safe, during the day and in the evening? How are you feeling about that, just over time?
Yeah, I mean, safety is a real personal issue, right? I mean, we all sort of dealt with our own sort of perception of safety around this pandemic. I personally feel safe in downtown. I've lived downtown for a year. But I tell you, I worry more about my kids being out by themselves than I did before. We have a lot of folks with behavioral health issues in downtown that are not getting their needs met. That's really at the core of our safety issues in downtown. It is folks who are dealing with mental illness and substance use that have the sidewalk but nowhere else to turn. And that drives a lot of the other challenges. And that's what we need to confront head on, is getting services to those folks, getting them inside. And if we do that, we deal with a lot of our public safety issues, a lot of the shoplifting, a lot of some of the random assaults, a lot of the folks in crisis that scare folks that don't, when you see someone screaming on the corner, you don't know what's going on. So that's really the basis of this charter amendment, is to require the city to invest at levels that they haven't been willing to invest in, to help those folks and get them inside.
Great. Second question that came through, is Amazon still subsidizing the expenses of the small retailers in South Lake Union?
To my knowledge, they certainly made huge subsidies and investments early on in this, to the order of $10+ million of dollars. And most of their tenants are still here. So they've helped them through. I don't know if they're still cutting the checks for their rent or not, but and there's been some new tenants that have come in. Maybe it's hard to believe that new businesses are able to open in this pandemic, but some have, including Sub Pop Records opened a great store in one of the Amazon towers. So they've been a huge help to our downtown, getting through this the best we can, and to their tenants as well.
Yeah. Another question, how do you think downtown is going to adjust to more and more companies moving to a hybrid working model? And a follow-on question, are we going to have a lot of empty office space downtown?
We're paying close attention to sort of all the research that's been done nationally, locally, and then internationally, both with companies and employees around the future of work. And when you take it all together, it generally says that a small minority of us want to go back to exactly how it was, 5 days a week in the office. A small minority of us see ourselves continuing to do exactly what we've been doing if we've been working from home 5 days a week. And then the rest of us sort of like some aspects of flexibility, but see ourselves back in the office at least a handful of days a week. So I do believe the office is still very much relevant. I think it gets recalibrated in certain ways, the amount of space that people need, how that space is used. But I think there's a lot to be determined, and that when companies do go back at some level, there's a whole set of dynamics, and maybe still maintain some work from home. There's a whole set of dynamics that then come into play that don't exist right now. And I think there's a bit of this fear of missing out if I'm deciding I'm going to still work from home 5 days a week, but there's people in the office and I miss out on that promotion, or I miss out on getting assigned to that cool new project or that cool new account. Those are dynamics that aren't really at play now for companies that are fully remote. So I think there is a gravitational pull back to the office. And then finally, I think the preferences that the workforce of today that has gravitated towards cities over these last 20 years, their preferences to be in places where you can have access to art and culture and sports and entertainment and go out to happy hour with your colleagues and walk to the market after work. I don't think those have fundamentally changed. I do think we all maybe appreciate that flexibility and want to maintain some aspects of that. But I think the office is here to stay. I think there's going to be a period of adjustment, certainly for our downtown and others, because so many of those office workers were customers for other businesses. And we're not going to get 350,000 workers, which we had prior to the pandemic, back in July. We know that. So there's a period of adjustment, no doubt.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to turn the floor over. We'll have some more time for Q&A at the very end, but I want to turn the floor over now to Jennifer Danner and Matthew Roberson from Seattle Police Department. So thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for the introduction, and thank you, Amy, for inviting us to be here today. We're looking forward to the conversation, and thank you, John, for that wonderful overview of kind of what's going on downtown and how we might fit into that a little bit. So my name is Jennifer. I'm a crime prevention coordinator with SPD, and I'm joined by Officer Roberson, who's our youth outreach officer in our collaborative policing bureau. We have a couple things that we want to make sure that we discuss, and we want to leave time for questions. But I thought it might be helpful for Officer Roberson to explain a little bit about the changes in our department over the last year and how that might be impacting downtown in both positive and negative ways.
So yeah, thanks again, Jennifer, for that introduction. And I think John, while you were speaking, he kind of covered some topics that I was thinking that would be relevant for this. So as far as like a variety of changes that have gone on with our department over the last year, where to start, right? So one of the things that John said about 200 plus officers leaving our department, kind of a combination, like some of those are regular retirements, but there's a lot of officers retiring early, switching over to other agencies, or just not doing this job anymore. And so that's really impacted like our ability to kind of be present in the way that we used to be present, to respond to calls in the timeliness that we want to. So as far as making the highest priority calls, officers are still able to kind of make their goals now with some adjustments we've made. But as far as the ones that like, we've heard this a lot, right? Hey, I called and I had to wait like 4 hours, 6 hours, or nobody came. We've heard that a lot. And that's something that to try to address those needs as best we can, a lot of our specialty units or follow-up units, so that could be like community police teams, where they kind of work on very chronic issues that take a lot of time and effort. They've had to be rolled back into patrol to make our patrol like time goals, right? We had to create, take detectives from our detective and follow-up units off those positions and to help supplement patrol as well. And then take some officers from patrol to create a group, Community Response Group, CRG. I always say CRG, all right. Community Response Group. So what our Community Response Group has been doing is kind of being available from about 3 p.m. until 1 or 2 a.m. to respond primarily to demonstrations, which have happened daily since the end of May. And it was really taxing our department. And we had to figure out a way to still provide 911 services, to be able to respond to demonstrations when they happen, and to still provide all these things that we need to provide with 200 less officers to begin with. And so kind of a combination of all these things have made places like downtown, where there used to be a lot of like foot patrols, like you might be seeing mounted out, bikes are all over. A lot of those bike officers are now in the response group, and they're kind of doing those things on a regular basis. And so as far as John saying that they might be trying to get off-duty officers to supplement that, that's something that we've been hearing in different neighborhoods too. So not just downtown, but other business improvement districts or BIA associations saying like, hey, what can we do to get some extra officers down here? And that's something that's kind of been impacting. And that's a small overview. Even my job myself, like the youth outreach officer, there used to be 4 of us. Now there's 2. And as far as like working directly with kids, we're not doing things in person, right? So I've been doing a lot of community meetings, trying to figure out like when things do start to open up, where are the needs? How can we bring families into this as far as really making like positive activity generators? So things that will like help people come together and get back to talking and working together. That's a lot of what I'm trying to do now. So not just youth, but everybody out there. And that's a lot of what this last year has forced our department to do. Not that we weren't already working on it, but like having to like really get this ramped up really quickly. If you wanted to add anything I might have missed.
No, I think that was great. I'd like to do a quick overview of crime, because I know that's a hot button topic, right? So looking at the numbers, it's kind of surprising and a little bit deceiving, I guess. So I'll share a little bit and then I'll try to explain a little bit as to maybe why these numbers are showing us this. So looking at the downtown commercial core, crime is actually down almost 50% over 2020 for the year 2021, year to date. So we're looking at January 1st to now compared to 2020, January 1st to this date last year. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, because we might think from the media and other things that crime is skyrocketed, or it's out of control in certain neighborhoods. But what's really interesting is that COVID and this past year in terms of civil unrest in our community has really done a lot to crime in a strange way, and we're kind of trying to catch up to figure out what the heck is happening. For example, things like burglary are down in most areas of the city because most of us are home during the day. So when a crime like that normally would have occurred, we're now home, so it's not happening. So some of those criminals we tend to believe are choosing other crimes to commit. So for example, auto theft is an issue all throughout the city that is up in most neighborhoods. Cars are getting stolen much more frequently than they ever were before. And we're kind of guessing that that's because they may not have committed that crime before and they were maybe focused on a different crime in the past. So kind of overview of stats, like I said, in just the downtown commercial core, we're down about 50% over last year. Person crime is down about 12%. And person crime, we typically speak about sort of personal safety, things like assault, robbery. And then when it comes to property crime, the only crime that is up as compared to this time last year is auto theft, like I mentioned. So we're kind of trying to, like I said, sort of figure out why that might be and how that might be impacting people in a different way. One of the other questions that we wanted to kind of just touch on briefly is, should we be concerned about safety? As we're returning to work downtown or in the general area of Seattle, should we be concerned about safety? And this sounds like a silly answer, but we always should be concerned about safety. Personal safety is something that, especially for women, but everyone should be concerned about at all times when you're outside of your home. And I wanted to do a quick little plug that the SPD does have a free personal safety class if you're interested in learning a little bit more about awareness, intuition, safety tips based on different locations or activities. Please feel free to reach out to me directly and I can provide you with information for how to sign up for a class. Officer Roberson and I actually teach that class. So like I said, little plug in for one of our projects that is a personal safety class that we offer for women as well as a mixed gender format. So please feel free to reach out if you're interested in that. Officer Roberson, do you want to speak a little bit about how do we personally keep ourselves safe, kind of generally speaking, downtown, but also sort of in a public environment?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we're trying to talk about is being aware and being really aware of what's going on around you, as far as like being intentional about your plans, letting people know where you are, where you're going, where you plan to do when you get there. And if we're talking about how downtown might look different and people are starting to come back downtown, they haven't been here for a while, as also like John kind of mentioned, like transit situations are a little bit different as far as like where people have been setting up in the environment of downtown, it's also different. So as far as like practicing on a daily basis, like knowing where you're at, right? Trying to keep things that could be easy targets or like people could spot, like having phones in your hand that takes away your awareness. And it's also like something that somebody would target, right? Mm-hmm. You know, even kind of like driving or walking down the street, I went like maybe a mile down from where our headquarters is to go get my watch fixed, and just like noticing how many businesses were just closed. And I don't remember exactly what number John said, but I think it was like close to 200 over the last year. But then in a lot of these businesses, there are people like setting up in it. And not to say that that's anything wrong with that, but that's something to be aware of. Like there's a lot of alcoves where you might want to give yourself a little bit of distance and a little bit of space. And that's just a safety and awareness thing that you can do. So if something were to happen or something is occurring in front of you, you have a little bit of time to react and to kind of come up with some sort of plan. And as far as safety, did you want to add anything on
No,
that?
I think that was great. I think, like I said, another little plug for our class, we talk a lot about safety and personal awareness and intuition. But one of the questions in the chat really gets at if folks are maybe under-reporting crime. And that's something that we are seeing across the city. And I wanted to just touch on this briefly, that even though we are having what is sort of common knowledge, a staffing problem, right? that doesn't mean that crime is not important to us and that you shouldn't report. So every time you feel like it's necessary for an officer to come to your location, a crime is occurring, you feel unsafe, I want you to feel empowered to call 911 at any time. Or we kind of have this adage that it's always okay to be wrong. You're never going to get in trouble for calling 911. If you don't feel safe, call 911, allow us to come out and hopefully address the situation as quickly as possible. But yes, we are seeing some crimes be underreported right now because of response times and issues with maybe waiting hours for an officer to respond. But please know that we are a very data-driven department, meaning we look at data every single day to determine where officers will be located, where we will do outreach, where different teams will do long-term operations, is all based on data. And if we don't have that data, then we can't do anything to address it. So I think that even though it might take a little while for officers to respond, I know it can be frustrating, but please do still call. Officer Roberson, if you have any additional thoughts on that.
It's kind of along the same lines of Jennifer saying that officers do need to be able to say, like, hey, this is where things are happening, right? Hey, we need more resources here. And it's something that, like, my bosses and the people above me can try when they're, trying to get more support for the police department. They can say, these are the needs we're not able to make right now. And that does help, at least with the data. And so I think that's something that from when I came on to now, I started almost 9 years ago, but the department has really shifted its focus and done a lot more with data than it has ever in the past. And I think at least having some sort of data, even though, estimates are usually like, I don't remember what it is, but for the most part, we know estimates are crime is underreported. But when people want to know, we can't really tell them how much is underreported. We can only show them what we do have. And so I think as an officer, like having those sets are always good. And then it's when I was doing patrol, I was able to kind of like see where things happen and just read reports and kind of just familiarize myself with the people I need to be looking for, things that are happening in my area. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that. Or which one do you want to go?
The chat, go for it.
So I'll read the next one from the chat, and then maybe if you want to read that. So Lori said, I have called 911 after seeing people trying to break into cars on the street, but no one came out. And so if nobody came out when that was happening, there's also a chance that maybe they came out later, or maybe we were delayed. But something I can suggest though, Lori, if you are calling in 911 and you want to make sure that that somebody came out eventually, you can request for contact. The officer can contact you either by phone or they can try to do it in person. It's kind of up to your own preference. But I do like to suggest this to people because I do hear this a lot. They're like, hey, I called and I don't think anybody came. And then sometimes I'm able to check the case number and say, oh, I looked at the case number, somebody did actually come, but it was like quite a bit after you called. That's probably why you didn't know, and probably why they weren't able to kind of stop what happened. But if you want to, even get to know the officers that are working your area, it's always okay to request for contact, and you don't necessarily have to have them physically come over to talk to you. They can call you just as fine.
And Laura, your follow-up question of do you need to ask for a case number at that time? The call taker can provide the case number for you if you'd like to follow up on it. And you can always, for example, contact me as well, and I can look and see what happened with the call. At any time, we can look at things like that and provide you with a little bit of information. If, for example, like you didn't think an officer came out, like Officer Roberson said, we can look at the call and see if they did, see how long it maybe took for them to respond. And as Officer Roberson said, asking for contact can be a great way to sort of figure out what happened with the case, depending on the situation. I know that was kind of fast, sort of a lot of information, but I do want to leave some time for questions. We're always available. If you don't get your question in now, feel free to contact us directly. I'll put Officer Roberson and I's contact information in the chat so that you can reach out to us directly at any time.
Thank you very much for the helpful overview and some data on what's actually happening in our downtown community. Yeah, let's open it up for questions. feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type your questions into the chat and we will make sure that we get to as many of these as possible.
I have a question, Veronica. Can I just jump in or should I wait?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I'm not used to the whole hands up thing. So just wanted to, this is just a question for John. It seems like the restaurant industry in downtown Seattle has been just decimated. So many restaurants have closed down. We've heard from people like Tom Douglas that, places like the Dahlia Lounge aren't going to reopen and things like that. Yeah, I know these things take time, but part of the scene of downtown Seattle was, part of the cachet of going downtown was to have access to some of these restaurants. What do you think we can do to try and encourage kind of restaurateurs to try and come back to downtown and try and, be an innovative place to go and have food?
We got to deal with the safety, security, shoplifting, those issues that are not just impactful to their customers, but also their workforce. People working in retail environments that are having to deal with some of this. So I think that's critical. It's got to be a safe environment. And that was, an industry in some ways that was, facing some challenges going into this pandemic with just a lot of people in the market, thin margins. And we were seeing quite a bit of closures back in 2019. And we need to continue to attract a diverse customer base for them. The conventions, the leisure travelers, office workers. We've got a booming residential population still, and 7,000 new condos and apartments under construction. But we've got to create an environment that people want to be in, that's interesting and safe and delightful and dynamic, and experiences that you can't get anywhere else. And I think if we can do that, we're going to have restaurateurs come back. After every recession is a period of folks who weren't in the market before that come with their idea and open up a space. And so my goal is let's make this downtown the easiest place in the region to open a small business, whether you're a restaurant or retailer. And what can we do together between the property owners, the private sector, and the city to make that a reality and deliver on that promise? Because we want to fill up all those storefronts. And we want those experiences, dining and otherwise, that you can't get anywhere else. So I don't think it's all that complicated, because Seattle has got so many of the great assets and fundamentals, and people want to be here as long as it's a really great experience when you're here.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, go ahead, Laura.
So my question is for John as well. So John, given the situation with, the graffiti, the garbage downtown, the lack of solutions from the city, does your organization or the other chamber organizations, do you guys attend the council meetings? And are you able to input any kind of reports or anything to try to get the city council to do some activity that is proactive to helping these people?
Yeah, I should have given a little bit of an overview more on kind of who we are and what we do, but our organization works to influence public policy and decisions and investments in infrastructure downtown. And we also provide a lot of direct services on our own. So we manage a cleaning team of 80 people. We manage parks downtown, put on events and concerts, but also work to influence public policy. We are working with the mayor's office on downtown recovery. I'm co-chairing a task force that she's put together of 35 or so folks from arts and culture and small biz and big employers. And cleaning and beautifying downtown is a big priority of ours. The city has made some recent investment there through the Clean City Initiative, as they've called it. We're also making a lot of investment, increasing our cleaning, working to get down every piece of plywood that we can, get the graffiti down, deal with some of the entrances at the freeway ramps to downtown to get those cleaned up. So it looks a lot better today, frankly, than it did, 2-3 months ago. There's still plenty of work to do, but we're putting up murals where we have, empty storefronts. We're putting art installations in some of the windows. Those are going in over the last couple of weeks. There's a lot more lighting in the trees in downtown than there has been before. But we think that's super critical, that, the physical environment has got to look and feel inviting. and plywood and broken windows and graffiti don't send the right signal. So we're doing everything we can, working with property owners to get that down.
We can try to get that question in the chat real fast from Carolyn. Carolyn wrote, so there was a dramatic decrease in body count in the downtown corridor, but only a 12% decrease in crime. So as far body count meaning the number of people being in downtown. And once again, I don't necessarily have the numbers to say how many people were coming downtown prior to now, but in general, I think people are okay with agreeing that there's a lot less people in downtown now than before, right? So I think like what you're getting onto, that that the decrease, what does that mean with the decrease? I guess what I would say from our thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a victim more likely. And I think that's what we're still trying to push, like the awareness piece. And just because you're coming down here doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a victim. Who were the victims last year? Were they people from out of state? Were they kind of the ones that don't really know their way around here? Like there's a lot of things that go into that I can't necessarily speak to with any sort of like authority, but we're always kind of trying to push like the awareness piece and just kind of recognizing that it is lower right now. There are less people, so it's something to take into consideration. But I don't know if there's something else you want us to try to touch on with that specific question. Or if you want to add anything.
No, I think that's good. I think the question kind of in the end of it is, isn't that a huge increase in the likelihood you'd be a victim downtown? And I think that the answer to that is no, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're more likely to be a victim of crime. That does mean we would encourage you to be a little more aware than maybe you were in the past when you are downtown, because there are sort of less people in the area. There's sort of less kind of hustle and bustle than there used to be. So we do encourage you to be more aware. And like I said, we're happy to talk about that further if there's questions about that.
There's another sort of related question in the chat. Is there a plan to look at foot traffic in downtown Seattle and proportionately increase patrols when employees start coming back into the office, etc.? I know I'm hearing it's a bit of a loop with my employees as they don't want to come back downtown because they don't feel safe. How do you convince or communicate to employees that it's safe to return?
That's certainly something we're urging city government to do is you know, if the private sector says we're ready to come back, we're bringing folks back, we're ready to have meetings or open our office, or the museums and other places are opening, then we need sort of a commensurate, you know, action and level of investment, particularly around safety and homelessness from city government. We are, as an organization, through the business improvement district that was mentioned, currently investing in off-duty patrols. It's likely that we will be investing more in the summer months. And again, really trying to use those two windows of time in July and September to sort of catalyze action, not just by the private sector, but again, by the city to say, you know, folks are ready to come back, they're making decisions, and therefore let's get ready, let's make it delightful and safe and welcoming for them. So as employers, and we're gonna have a survey out here either tomorrow or early next week to employers in the downtown area to get a better sense of timelines on when you're coming back. It's helpful for us to know that so we can go to the city, go to the mayor's office, go to the council to say, here's what the private sector is doing, bring in folks back, which are customers for small business, customers for arts and cultural organizations that you want to see succeed, and we need you to do these things. So we need action by city government on that front.
I think it's also important as community members to communicate with your council directly as well. Be sure that they hear you and they hear what your desires are. And I encourage you also to reach out to your police department directly. Let us know what you're concerned about. Let us know that you'd like conversations around safety. We've had, Matthew and I, just over the last couple of weeks, many businesses reach out to us and ask us for these personal safety presentations for their staff that are coming back to Seattle in this new environment. And we're happy to do that and to talk to staff about what sort of the reality is and how to be safe, and what the reality is for our staffing and for our ability to address some of these things. Because I think it's important to sort of remember that we can't arrest our way out of a lot of these issues that are going on downtown. Of course, we are an integral part of safety, but we're not the only piece, right? We're not the only piece of the puzzle when it comes to safety, especially downtown and in the urban environment. So I'll start with any additional thoughts on that.
Well, the only thing I was going to add on that is coming from a community outreach background in the police department now, the collaboration piece is what I hear and I think is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So businesses talking to who's around them, right? Trying to work with city government, letting the police department know what's going on, and coming up with fun activities to kind of take back these spaces and to use them for the positive, to get the positive users back that we want to be back. And I think kind of all working in cohesion is the key to it, and not necessarily come up with our own plans and then the police department doesn't know anything about it until it's already happening. They're like, oh, this thing is happening, we got to get people down there. But I think just trying to get back to everybody working together, I think is what's really important for me when I'm doing this kind of stuff.
I had not so much a question, but a comment. I have been working at least 4 days a week since the pandemic began downtown. And in the beginning, part of the fear on my part was feeling outnumbered, walking, within a block or two radius and having several homeless people around and me being the only person who is working downtown. But I have noticed that as the numbers have started to increase downtown, it's almost like a catch-22. If we can get a few more people downtown, so you're not feeling so threatened all the time, that you will feel safer in general.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Eyes on the street, feet on the street matter. And there's many folks that sort of fled and hunkered down to save the healthcare system and protect each other's health. And those that were left were the folks that were suffering downtown before all of this, many again with behavioral health issues. And so you notice that much more than you did back in February of 2020.
John, can I ask you one more question?
Please.
So one of the things, our office is in South Lake Union. And so one of the things that I see, and I live in Ravenna, so I'm up and down I-5. And so one of the things that you see to me as a huge problem is the garbage. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you guys with your organization are trying to address, or is that strictly a city issue? Because I don't understand all the garbage. I mean, I understand where it's coming from. I don't understand the lack of being able to pick it up and get rid of it for multiple reasons, health being number one.
Lori, are you speaking to along Interstate 5 mostly, or in other parts of?
Yeah, I mean, it's along Interstate 5. I mean, even along Roy Street. I mean, we've got homeless tents and garbage all around them. I mean, just piles of it, and piles of garbage on the Mercer exit going north on 5, where that looks like it's been a private garbage dumping ground. And so you see those pockets, it literally is just garbage.
Yeah, our jurisdiction for that business improvement district I mentioned is Denny Way down to Pioneer Square and from I-5 to the water. So the property owners within that area are paying special assessments that we are then using to do cleaning and other direct services. So it doesn't extend to those areas that you talked about, but I totally agree with you that the sense of civic pride here over this last year, I think, is eroded greatly of sort of what we've allowed to take hold in parks and along the freeway and other parts of our city. And we need WashDOT to be doing more particularly on the freeway between the International District all the way up through the U District, the graffiti and the garbage. And then I think we need the Clean City Initiative ×3. The initial investments that the mayor made and the council whittled away a little bit, but still kept a couple $1 million in this current year budget was a good start, but not enough. And we need to raise the level of sort of civic pride around our parks and public spaces and the physical environment. We've got this beautiful natural surrounding, and then in some of our urban areas, we really let it slide.
I will just point to one thing. If you are seeing, for example, trash or other things that are on city property, you can report that via the Find It, Fix It app. If you're not familiar with that, it is an app where you can take a picture of a problem and basically it geotags it and sends it to the proper city agency to address it. So things that you can report on Find It, Fix It are examples such as street light out or trash or a pothole or a found needle, things like that that are on city property. You can use the Find It, Fix It app to report. There's also a phone number you can call it 684-CITY if you'd like to take that. You can use that if you prefer. But one thing to be aware of is trash associated with an encampment or associated with homelessness is a little bit of a different conundrum, I guess. I'm trying to think of a good way to put that. There are moratoriums right now involving removing encampments or moving them related to COVID and city policies. So that's something to be aware of as well.
I have kind of a related question on that point about the Find It, Fix It. Is the city or is Seattle Police Department, are they going to get back into responding to reports of abandoned vehicles? Because I know in my neighborhood that's a big deal. It's just these vehicles sit for months and there's no one, there's no one living in them. They're just there. And I've wondered about that.
Yes. So the short answer is yes, we are going to get back to that. The long answer is that it's a little complicated. So if you're not familiar with this, the 72-hour ordinance in the city of Seattle basically means that on a non-tagged location, if there's not a parking permit needed or any sort of parking sign, you can park a vehicle for 72 hours without any problems. After 72 hours, it can be towed or ticketed depending on where it's parked. In, was it April last year? They put a moratorium on the 72-hour rule. So all throughout the city, basically there was no parking restriction and you could not be towed or ticketed just for parking. I don't know if Officer Robson is going to speak to the changes in that recently and how that's going to impact us going forward.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what they're doing, so they're going to slowly kind of roll out where they'll do like warnings on all these people and let them, or all these vehicles, let them know, hey, we're going to start enforcing this. I don't know what date that's going to be, but right now I believe they're in the warning stage, and then it will kind of get back to being enforced again. And so it's something that like our parking enforcement branch does most of that work. I think like that's what I know so far. We're kind of waiting for the rest of the details throughout, because there are still some things associated with people that officers will kind of have to be around for those situations.
And to report that at this point, probably the easiest way is either to contact parking enforcement directly, or you can use the non-emergency line, which also communicates directly with parking enforcement.
It's good to know that it's coming back.
Yes, we were told, I believe, last week that it's officially into the education sort of phase.
This was the April 1st.
April 1st, yeah, now we're back into education, and then enforcement will come after some education.
Great. Okay. Other questions? Other Q&A? All right, I waited 5 seconds. Well, thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you everyone for great questions. You've got the contact information for each of our panelists in the chat if you haven't picked up on that. And that kind of concludes the education portion of our program for today. So we really appreciate you being with us, all of our panelists. It's been very educational and informational, and all of us that are in leadership positions in our firms, we've got a lot of decisions to make, and certainly can take all of this information into consideration as we contemplate these plans. So thank you very much. We're going to move into, you're welcome to stay, but we're going to move into our passing the gavel portion. So if you have other things to tend to, great. Thank you very much. Otherwise, we're going to move into the ceremony, I guess. All right. Great. So do we have everyone here?
I think so. I feel like the
Yes.
sun is very bright on my face, so I'm ghosty.
Well, good. It looks like we're losing a few people. Thank you, everyone. I think that we can. I was reflecting on what I would say about passing the gavel, and about just the last year, and there is no doubt that Michelle Smith, your presidency will probably go down in chapter history as one of the most unique and unprecedented. You know, hopefully you'll be our only chapter president whose entire term has been served virtually. So I have high hopes that even though we're starting off virtually in Amy's presidency, things will turn around this year. Obviously, the pandemic plot twist of the virtual environment has been, I think, only a minor setback. You know, you've led our chapter gracefully and skillfully through the ups and downs of the last year. And you know, this has all been in addition to your role as firm administrator with Jameson Pepple Cantu. You've demonstrated extraordinary leadership in an extraordinary time, and you've been a beacon of hope and guidance for all of us. And our chapter is as strong and stronger than ever under your watch. And we are eternally grateful for not only what you've done over the last year, but just your overall commitment and dedication to our chapter. You've been, you know, a board member for many years, and time again, you've just shown that, you know, your commitment and dedication. So I thank you on behalf of the chapter, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you so that you can say some words, and then you can pass the gavel to Amy.
Thanks, everyone. I'm watching in the cameras. My face gets redder and redder and redder. What a year this has been. Our official first cancellation was last year's passing of the gavel. I mean, who would have thought? It was just incredible. And I just have to say, first off, our chapter has such a strong foundation through the work of all the past presidents. And sorry, my dog is barking, and our past board members. I could not have done that without that strong foundation. Because of that, everything was pretty much in order with events, so on and so forth. So we had a plan. We just had to pivot to using Zoom, to taking funds that we would have used for events, for catering and such, and use that for speakers. And I hope that throughout this past year, we have been beneficial as a chapter to all of our members, both at the local level and the national level. That was my changed goal after the pandemic hit, was having, I just knew I needed PSALA, and I knew other administrators would need us as well. I could not have done it by myself. There were many days where I just wanted to curl up in a corner with a nice blanket and put that over my head and pretend, you know, make the world go away. So both the executive board and the extended board I could not have done it without their participation. So thank you to each and every one of you. We could not have done it without our business partners participating. And I think because of that, we brought useful tools to both our members and hopefully our business partners. With that being said, I have prepared nothing, so I'm going to be very brief. I'm leaving you in very competent hands with Amy Strzok. So Amy, if you want to take this show over, I'm ready to pass it on. Pass
I bet you are. Awesome. Well, thanks, Michelle. I want to echo obviously what Michelle said about our board and our extended board. This has been the year of service. I think we all have been busy and underwater, but still we knew how important the work that we were doing was. So just to name our extended board: Suzanne Tran, Erin Mistry, Kara Hohenstein, Veronica Sutton, Meredith Taylor, and Denny Krantz. I'm very happy to say that many of them will be continuing on because they're in the middle of a 2-year commitment, so they're stuck with me. And I'm also very pleased to share, very pleased that Suzanne Tran is going to saddle up next to me as the president-elect. She's going to be fantastic, and she's going to keep me in line, so that is always a good thing. Additionally, Erin Mistry will be rejoining as the Vice President of Business Partners. And Michelle Smith, of course, will be moving into the immediate past president role to stay around and answer all of my questions. Talking about Michelle and her unprecedented presidency, I feel like I put the last year into 3 different phases: the get out phase, the function phase, and then the well-being phase. And Michelle has guided us through all of those phases with grace and action. She used the word pivot. I think pivot is the ultimate word for 2020, and no one embodies that more than Michelle. Through it all, she's never hesitated. She just flew into action, and she immediately asked the questions: how do we keep engaged? How do we provide support? How do we continue to build our member relationships? And how do we provide value? And I will say, hands down, the answer to all those questions was Michelle. She took it and ran with it, and we were successful because of her leadership. So I say, on behalf of the entire organization, Michelle, thank you for what you've done this past year. Your year will live in infamy, but we appreciate you so much. I would say that my big takeaway from the past year is that I don't know the answers, but I know the right people. And I am so lucky. I think we are all so lucky to have the right people in this organization. Our members are engaged. They provide smart and creative solutions when need be. Our business partners keep us current in the industry, and they are unbelievably supportive. I think this next year is going to provide a whole different type of challenge. As we start talking about our return to office plans, our daily conversations have already started to change. We now talk about vaccinations and hybrid workplaces, hoteling, the dreaded long-term care, payroll tax, COBRA subsidies, Zoom rooms, and I'm sure there's more to come. I know that these topics are too heavy for any of us to bear alone. So my theme for the upcoming year is going to be the team lift, that we all are going to come together and share the load. The PSALA will, of course, continue to provide all the education and share strategies, but I would like to build our committee involvement. I would like to start investing in our up-and-coming leaders and firm administrators. I would like to have a stronger presence on LinkedIn so that we can publicly celebrate our organization, our individual members, and our business partners. And a final note, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term Xennial. It's referred to as the micro generation of Generation X and Millennial, and it sits with those born between 1965 and 1980. And it's defined as having a childhood or an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. And so without fully disclosing my age, I am part of this micro generation. And I am hoping so incredibly hard that my term is going to be the reverse of the Xennial generation. We are going to start as we are, fully digital, and that my presidency will wrap up at our local conference in February 2022 in person. Fingers crossed. With that, I just want to thank you all for attending the Pass the Gavel. Thanks to all of our presenters. Everyone stay strong. Wish me luck. And here we go.
Awesome. Michelle, I saw your husband
He had to peek in.
Give him a big thank you too for being your support over the last year.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Lisa, thank you for the background.
Are we going to get a woo?
Is she still here?
It is.
You're welcome, and sorry if I blew your eardrums.
Did not.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We will wrap up, and yep, here we go. Next term.
Thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
I wanted to put a little plug on a couple of events coming up. We're going to be getting some information out soon about, we're going to have a round table with a number of our business partners on the, Amy made mention to it, the Washington long-term care tax, which I'm sure strikes fear in the hearts of many. And then on the 27th of April, I think there was an email that just went out. We're going to have an HR section meeting on returning to on-site work. So look for more information on both of those events, and we hope to see you here. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Good,
very much.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Take care, you
Have a
guys.
good
Bye.
night.
Bye.
Love it. I'm just getting caught up on the comments here. All right. Have a good evening, Amy.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Veronica.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep.